Danaskamun, good morning. You have such beautiful territory up here. My nation is along the #1 highway, so we don't get this view all the time back home. It's really nice to be here on such an important conversation. A little bit about myself. My name is Cadmus Delorme. I'm 40 years young. I was elected chief of Cowsis when I was 33 years old. I'm serving my 7th year as chief. I got a gray hair for every month I've been elected as a chief, and absolutely love the journey that I'm on. My conversation this morning with all of you is quite heavy. It is the journey I'm going to share with you is about the Merivale residential school and our approach to validating the unmarked graves and what we have learned and what we have to share. And also, I'm hoping there's questions or comments back as well, because we're all on this journey together. I am not a residential school survivor. I was born in 1982. My mom and dad attended each a residential school. My dad went to Maryville, where Cowsis is. My mother went to Birtle, which was a Anglican church-run residential school in Manitoba. And I'm the youngest of 9 kids. I'm the baby of my mom and dad, but my mom and dad met later in life. So I'm the only child from my mom and dad. I have all like half brothers and sisters. So growing up at my house, you used to hear this, "Honey, your kid and my kid are beating up our kid." I was our kid. Yeah. So a lot of my brothers and sisters attended a residential school as well. And growing up on Cowsis, that's where I grew up. At our kitchen table, when we would have conversations when I was a little kid, we would start talking about the local town, I don't mean to be so direct, but the white people and stuff like that. And I would notice sometimes my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters would kind of have like an anger or a frustration, and I couldn't figure it out at the time, because I grew up in such a blessed, loved home. My parents never talked to me about their past. They always showed me love and humor at the kitchen table and did everything they could. And when I got older, I started to venture out a little bit. And I left Cowsis after I graduated high school. I attended the First Nations University of Canada, one of our institutions in this province. I attended it in Regina. And I took this Indigenous Studies class. And I walked into my first Indigenous Studies class at university, just because I'm Indian and I grew up Indian and I grew up on a reserve. I thought I knew what an Indian was. I didn't. My parents never talked about the past with me growing up at home. Even our own reserve school, we never really took Indigenous studies. It was kind of social studies at the time. But in my Indigenous Studies class, I started to learn about the history of us, of my family, of many that have went through this journey. And I started to get angry. And I'm like, why? What do you mean my people went through this? What do you mean that this is what happened? How come I didn't know this? And I say that in my opening because a lot of the young people today, and we could hear the beautiful powwow music that's going on in the youth tent, a lot of them they don't really know, because we never really talked about it. And that was the first thing I had to understand in university. Is I started to get angry and frustrated at why my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents had to go through something that they never told me before. And so I turned that anger and frustration into strategy and hope. I started to talk to my parents. They started to tell me. I started to ask them questions. I asked my dad, "So what happened in Merivale? Can you tell me what happened to you?" And then I started to ask my mom, what happened in Bertel? Can you share with me? And at first my parents, they told me, we never ever wanted to tell you anything because we didn't want to affect you in your growth. That was what my parents told me. I'm just sharing you my journey story here. And the more I asked questions, the more I started to have even more respect and understanding for my parents. But the thing in my journey is I asked them and then they told me. And so my brain was ready for it. I was ready to conceive it. I was ready to learn more. And I would read my material in university that you need to get by to get your credits to get university classes. But then I would go home and my parents would correct my work. They would tell me the truth. They would tell me things. And by the time I got my undergrad degree at First Nations University of Canada, I just came out of there with a new look at life, a new view at Indigenous and what we inherited and who we are today and what we have to do. But it also bonded me with the elders, with the knowledge keepers, with survivors, because I'm still learning, but at the same time, I want to show our youth what that reconciliation in the English term means, or what that hope means in us, because I stand here as someone who, I look at you in the audience, and if you've attended a residential school, if you have a challenge in life just because you fought to remain beautiful caramel skin brown and Indian, I thank you for that, because I stand here confident to share with you from my voice that change is coming. And I kind of knew I wanted to be a chief after I graduated undergrad, but I was only 31 at the time, and chiefs didn't look like a 31 skinny res kid, and I didn't really, and I kept kind of hinting, saying, I think I want to be a chief. And my dad, he passed away, but he made me laugh. Why the hell do you want to be a chief? He told me. I thought he was going to just be like, oh, my boy wants to be a chief, but he actually told me the opposite. Why the heck do you want to be a chief? And I was like, Dad, I want to be a chief because I think the tone starts at the top, I told him, and I want to bring a new tone. And so my mom at the time said, well, you're good at being First Nation, but to be a good leader for Indigenous, you got to learn the other side as well, the Western side. My mom is still with me today. She's so intelligent. So I went to get my master's at this school called the Johnson Shiama School of Public Policy. It's a real long term, but it's all Munyao laws. Like all it is, 100% Munyao laws. And I got my master's in that. So now, please, I'm leading to my story of what I'm trying to tell you here. Is I understand both sides now. Like I can sit in a meeting of all non-Indigenous, and I could define their laws, I could break down their laws, but then I'll educate them about Indigenous means, Indigenous laws. And why I say that is we are at such a unique moment in our life today in 2022 when Kamloops validated unmarked graves. As a chief, I always thought I was ready to help lead and to help heal. But it was so overwhelming in our nation of Cowsis when Kamloops came forward and validated their 215 unmarked graves, because it triggered many in my community. Like some of my strongest supporters and mentors in my office, they cried, they got frustrated, and I was like, okay, like what's my role here? I was thinking. Then Cowsis, we did ours. And I always knew there was unmarked graves where Cowsis was. This isn't a mass grave site, but Cowsis validated ours. And then others started to validate theirs. And there's two things. Oh, am I not loud enough? That's one thing I don't get told enough. I'm not loud. I'm usually pretty loud. There's two things that we learned at this moment in this province, in our nations, is for us as Indigenous people, it's validation. The unmarked graves are validation of the pain, frustration, anger, tiredness of trying to remain Indigenous, trying to show our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids we're tired. But we have never given up. We've always persevered. To our non-Indigenous friends and family, their shield is down right now, and they're admitting that I don't know much about the truth between Indigenous people and this province or this country. Our biggest challenge at the kitchen tables in this province today, especially from non-Indigenous, is the ignorance and accidental racism of the truth. And the unmarked graves has put us at a moment where all of us have to reset our compass just a little bit. The non-Indigenous, but even us at our kitchen tables. And I don't mean to be so direct, but even we at our Indigenous kitchen tables, we all need to adjust our compass just a little bit to make sure that our youth that are in that tent next door watching our beautiful dance, that they understand the resilience that many of us have never given up today. And so that's why it's so important at this time. And in Cowes' First Nation, I'm going to get into to what we did in our approach. So I'm going to get a little technical, then I'm going to get back to the more of the science, the storytelling of it. So please bear with me. I get your audience for 40 minutes, then your brains kind of cut me out. So I'm going to try and use the best of my 40 minutes, and hopefully there's comments and questions after. In 2018, before the pandemic, Cowes wanted to address unmarked graves at our former Marivelle Roman Catholic Residential School. As a kid, we have a bingo hall, one of the most sacred events in any community, the bingo. And on Cowes, kids would come to the bingo with their parents, but they weren't allowed in the bingo, and we weren't allowed to get in trouble outside the bingo. So we always just kind of did our thing at our bingo hall as a kid. And my mom, when we would get to the bingo hall, she would point. She would say, "Don't go play over there, my boy. There's unmarked graves." That's all she would tell me. I never asked. I just said, "Okay, Mom." And we always stayed away from that area. When I was chief in 2018, I asked, we started to talk about Cowes starting to address our intergenerational trauma as a community at that time. That's a really tough conversation to talk about in communities, but how do we address our internal intergenerational trauma? And so we said, well, let's identify the unmarked graves that were attached to the former Marivelle Residential School. So we partnered with SAS Polytechnic, an institution in this province in Regina, and we partnered with them. And we told them what we wanted to do in 2018 with radar penetrating system. Think of it like a golf push cart. If any of you are golfers, that's what it looks like. And it just has a little machine on it. And we told SAS Polytechnic, we're not scientists in this, but we know where they are. Do you have anything you could help us with? We applied for a grant from Canada, and we got it. We got a grant. And so it was all paid for. And then the pandemic hit. So everybody paused in this country because we were all trying to figure out what COVID-19 was. We restarted ours the same time Kamloops came out and validated theirs of 215. And so we had SAS Polytechnic come back to Cowes. And I'm going to be very open. The person that came, very science-minded, very technical, but non-Indigenous. His home country is India. And so when he came with an open mind, but he didn't know the Indigenous mindset. And so right away I pulled him aside, and his name was Abdul. I said, "Abdul, here's a pouch of tobacco. I want you to go to that elder over there, and I want you to give that elder the pouch of tobacco. and explain to that elder what you're doing here. I was like, you have to understand we have protocols here that are non-scientific. And so that moment, Abdul opened his mind. He says, absolutely, Chief. So he went over there and told the elder prayed, and then Abdul, we started. And so think of it as just, we cut the grass because the grass was quite high. So it was all cut. And Abdul started. Please, I'm going to get very technical here, and I know there's support here. I'm just going to tell you the cow's journey. And Abdul started with this machine. And so what this machine does is it doesn't pick up bone, it doesn't pick up flesh, it doesn't pick up... what it does is it picks up dirt that was disturbed 120 years ago up to 8 feet under. That's what radar penetrating system is. And so it picks up, so if we dug a hole 8 feet right here, 100 years later, someone could come with a radar penetrating system and say someone disturbed the soil. That's what it is. And so Abdul did it. Abdul did it 2 meters by 2 meters. And myself and a counselor were standing there. So every nation has a counselor that's been a counselor for 25 years. He's usually here's real cool, kind of old school kind of counselor. That's the counselor that was beside me, is that one. And so 100% community raised, 100% street smart, if I can say it like that. So him and I were standing there, and I was telling this counselor, I don't know what questions to ask Abdul. I'm not a scientist, but I don't feel he's doing it right. And he went 2 meters by 2 meters. And finally, he come to us about 20 minutes later, because Counselor Malcolm and I were standing there. And he says, yeah, I should be done in about an hour. And I was telling Malcolm, our counselor, I was like, I just don't know what to ask him, but I don't feel he's doing what we're asking him to do. So I always knew there was this grandmother from Cowes. Her name was Barb. She got trained to do Enbridge pipeline traditional gravesite searches. She was trained in this. So I called her and I said, Barb, I need you home tomorrow morning. I need you to come and watch this person do this radar penetrating system, because I don't know what to ask. So she said, okay, Chief, I'll be there in the morning. She comes from Regina. And Cowes is about an hour and 40 minutes from Regina. And I told Abdul, come back tomorrow morning. And so the next morning, Barb showed up, and Abdul showed up, and Counselor Malcolm and I showed up, and the elder showed up. We asked an elder to be there. And so Abdul started saying, yeah, I should be done in about 2 hours. And so Barb shadowed him. She looked over his shoulders, and you could see on this little screen. And sorry, I'm going to be very technical, but Barb told this person, well, you're doing 2 meters by 2 meters. You know, children are not 2 meters, she said. Like, you got to redo the whole thing, and you got to go half a meter by half a meter. And Abdul kind of argued with us. He's like, you know how long that's going to take me? And we told Abdul, we're not looking at a time here. We're looking to make sure that no one gets forgotten. And so Abdul redid it. And Barb shadowed him. It took them 4 days to do, I think it's 24,000 square meters. It sounds large, but it's probably double the size of this area here. And we bought, please, I'm going to be very technical here. We bought those flags from Home Depot with the orange flag with the steel. And they come in 200s. And we ran out, so we went back and bought some more. 400, we ran out. We went and bought some more 6, and we're like, holy cow, what are we actually doing here? Like, what are we... And so when we hit 751, that's when we started to understand what we just opened up, like what we just did. And so when we were done, Abdul, Barb, Counselor Malcolm, myself, we were all like very emotional, like just standing there, and you just see all these flags. And so because I didn't go to school there, and I knew it was a Roman Catholic run residential school, and the church was there, the first thing I asked is, these are not all children. And the validation came back, they're not all children. We know that. That was what the survivor told me. And so what we did is we welcomed in survivors. We wanted to have a non-public meeting, because we knew this was going to go out there, because Kamloops happened, and how much people wanted to go to Kamloops. We're like, we need to validate some things here, like what's going on. And so we had we brought food. When you say there's food there, people show up. We said, we got food at the gravesite, please come down. And so about 25 people came down, and we told them, look at what we just validated. Can you tell us like what to expect or what's going on? And so here's the story. This is what we were told at that time. In 1885, the Roman Catholic priest showed up on Cowsis, and they built a church within the 2 years. And then they located that gravesite, and they started using it, the Roman Catholic Church. And so all the local non-Indigenous communities and already the Cowsis citizens that were starting to go the Catholic way started to go to that church. And so what happened is the priest started giving Christian burials at the what we call the East Side in 1887. In 1898, the Maryville Residential School was opened. And from 1898 to 1960, so almost for 70 years, Roman Catholic faithgoers were able to be buried there. Also, children that attended Maryville that did not make it home were also buried there. And so in 1962, there was an argument between the priest, the chief, and another local. They had an argument in 1962. The priest got upset and told his maintenance worker, they didn't call it a bulldozer, we call it a bulldozer today, like a tractor with a blade in front. The priest told his worker, take that bulldozer and push all these headstones. And the worker did that. And so someone in our community remembers this day. And so these were all marked, and they pushed the headstones in 1962. The church then came back and put back headstones where the sisters and the priests were, but left everybody else. And so in 1974, the Roman Catholic Church stopped overseeing the Maryville Residential School, and Indian Affairs came in and started overseeing the residential school. And so that at the west side, I'm really trying to paint a picture for you here. On the west side, you're going to see headstones. That's our community gravesite from 1974 to today. So there's a huge gap on the east side of this huge land base that's double the size of this. And today we put solar lights there. And so at night, you're going to see all these solar lights light up. So to get back to the technical side, what Abdul and SAS Polytechnic did with our team is we GPSed everyone. And so if someone was to come tonight and remove the solar lights and remove the flags, they're GPS now. And so it's all locked in on the unmarked. In the last year, we validated that there are still 751. That is validated. And so to kind of get into the technical of the timeline, what we did is we hired a team. Barb LaValle is a Kokum from Cowses. She's the lead, and we let her create her own team. And so she has her own team. She separated them into the technical and the research. And so the technical worked with SAS Polytechnic. So we didn't just tell SAS Polytechnic, take all our information back to Regina and tell us when you're done. Like, our team is there overseeing everything, watching over the shoulder, learning, making sure that we can one day do this. And so that is pretty much validated. We were advised by our elders, we will never dig. We will never dig to validate. It's either GPS. Another one we brought in is called cadaver dogs. So those are trained dogs that can smell bone and flesh. And so we brought in cadaver dogs, and we had some areas of concern, so the cadaver dogs validated that for us. We also brought in professional drones to come in, because you can see little indents, to validate. So all that is the technical side, and we're pretty much done the technical side. What we're working on right now is the research side. This is the challenge we face, is Cowsis, Maryville Residential School, run by the Roman Catholic Church. In 1970, there's this elder on Cowsis, her name is Audrey. She worked for the Roman Catholic Church when they exited in 1974. And she said she remembers all these records leaving the church in 1973. And she was trying to keep some of them. And the priest threatened to charge her if she kept any of those records. And so Audrey watched all these records leave. And the way she explained it to us today, they were just binders upon binders upon binders. And so what we found out is those records went to Grayson, which is a town north of Cowsis, then to Yorkton, and now today they're in St. Boniface, Manitoba. And so when we found out, our research team went to St. Boniface. We were the first ones to go into their archives to look for Maryville records. You would think because, they're such a big organization that they would all be in files and you'd walk in there. It was the total opposite. There's just boxes upon boxes upon boxes, and they're shelved high and down. And so it's like, we thought we were going to spend 2 days there. Our first 2 days, we just came back home and realized that there's boxes upon boxes. And so we had to go through each box. And then when we would read Maryville or Cowsis, we would vet it. And then we had to pause there and say, well, what are we actually looking for? And so what we decided to do is a chronological timeline. So from 1898, we did them in decades, in every 10 years. So every 10 years, with priests, with sisters, with administrators, and with students entered on the records. And so we were doing them in decades, because what we're doing is some residential school survivors want this, they want justice. They want to make sure that someone could be charged. So they want us to treat this like a criminal, like it's a crime scene. So what we said is, well, let's put everything in chronological order. And so if any residential school survivor wants to press charges, we will give them all the evidence of who was in the school at that time. And so if there's an example of someone who was abused, say in 1952, we have who was in that school in 1952, from all the administrators, the priests, the nuns. Sorry, I'm getting very technical, and I don't mean to trigger anybody, but I'm just trying to, hopefully my message helps in your journey. And so this chronological approach, we felt was the best for us to do, is because we wanted to treat this like a crime scene as well. And so we ended up going back to St. Boniface 4 times, 2 days. They were so good. Sometimes there's rumors the Catholic Church is not showing us our documents. They never once denied us. They never once come and micromanaged us. They just left us. And every time we needed something, we'd go ask them. We brought our printer, we brought our scanner, we brought our smudge bowl. And here's a real hard truth I just want to share with you. You go in there looking for names. And when you're going through these files, they get very detailed in some of the stories. And those stories are really tough for our research team to conceive, to comprehend. And so one of the things we do with our research team is we give them mental health, emotional health support, and stuff like that. And so we're now done at St. Boniface. The second challenge we faced with research is half of it is in French, because a lot of the Roman Catholic that came from the East were also Francophone. So we had to partner with the University of Regina, the Francophone department, the French department. And so we signed an MOU with them, and we said, we're going to give you confidential documents. This is not for you to publicize, but can you translate them to English for us? And so that's what they're doing right now. We gave them a bunch of documents, and they have a group at the University of Regina in the French department translating them back for us. And so everything we do is to make that chronological timeline. And so lately, you're going to hear the government of Canada, they gave their records to the NCTR, I think it's called. It's out of Manitoba. So that's where we're at right now. We're actually working with the NCTR. So the NCTR, I'm going to get the acronym wrong. It's the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. And so they get all the documents from Canada. And so we're there right now. And so here's a couple technical things just to let you know. Everybody wants you to sign a memorandum of understanding. It's called an MOU. And sometimes, we got a little defensive because we would say, these are our documents. Why do we have to sign an agreement with you? We're just asking for our documents back. And so finally we told ourselves, okay, quit trying to get tough on every meeting. Let's just calm down here. We told ourselves, if a MOU is what they want, it's non-legal, it's non-binding. And so we've been signing MOUs, Memorandum of Understandings. So we have an MOU with everybody, and ultimately what it means is we're not going to go out and publicly state exactly what we're finding, but we will share it with survivors if needed. The second part, I'm going to start to conclude soon on the technical side, and I'll get back a little bit to the storytelling, is one of the things we got to understand is this is data. This is information. And in the Munyao, in the white mindset, someone always has to own the data. Own the data. And whoever owns the data has better decision-making authority. That's why in our band offices and that, and as a chief, I can validate this, it's tough for us to ever say how much children we have in care because the governments don't tell us how much children we have in care. It's tough to share how our health is because Health Canada doesn't share the data with us. This is, now I'm going to revert back to the unmarked graves. All this data out there is your data. This is our data. And so right now, there's something called OCAP training. Oh, thank you, AJ. There's something out there called OCAP training. It's ownership, possession, access, and control of data. And so it's called OCAP. And so if anybody is going to take this journey, I suggest you take what they call OCAP training. And all of our team did. And so now when they go into these meetings for research, we're very understanding of sovereignty of data. And we have all the technical words. So it's a really good training, and I'm just leaving that out there. It's called OCAP training. So now when we're in all these data centers, we remind them of whose data it is and what our purpose of it is. And it gives us words where we don't have to argue with them. We just assert our sovereignty on our data. And so that was one thing. The second thing is where we go from here. One of the things that our team gets overwhelmed with is this isn't a very emotional journey. And I like to use the word, when you got too much chiefs and not enough Indians in a room, it's hard to make a decision. And I mean that in the nicest way, because sometimes you got too much people saying what to do and not enough, that's why I say, I think we have too much chiefs and not enough Indians in the room, I always say. And I mean that as we got to know what our end goal is. And so one of the things I help our team with is to remind them of what our end goal is of this. Our end goal is the following for Merivale: to make sure that every unmarked grave is marked. That's our first end goal. We pretty much have that one check marked. The next end goal is to make sure that unmarked graves have a name on them. That is our next goal. That's a huge, huge task because these research are all over the place. That's our next end goal. Our last end goal is to make sure that we have a monument there and that it's cosmetically beautiful for years to come so people could come there in their own healing way and come and see it. And so every time our team kind of sways left or sways right, because, people will come and say, you should do this, you should do that, we got to do this, we got to do that. And it's not that we're, trying to accommodate everybody, but we keep our end goal very simple because that's what everybody agrees is our end goal. And so to start to conclude a little bit, some of the challenges as we face is I got criticized as a chief from Roman Catholic faith goers from Cowses because they defended their faith. And I have to know, and I know this as a chief, I'm a chief to my Roman Catholic faith citizens. I'm a chief to my spiritual belief prayer go citizens. And so I got criticized. It really internalized where we're at in our healing journey. And I'm going to end with this. Cowses First Nation, we're on this journey just like you. In Cowses, what we decided to do in the last 2 years is put a mirror in our canoe so we could start to address our challenges in our canoe, our intergenerational trauma. And the unmarked graves really showed how much healing we have to do, how much anger and pain we actually have, how much internal family challenges and family to family challenges, and how much pressure and blame is put on the chief and council of the day. And so we started to tell people in Cowses, nobody is coming to help us. Quit acting like there's a future chief, a future premier, a future prime minister. We gotta learn to help ourselves. And we have to learn to depoliticize our healing. Don't blame anymore. Let's just heal. And so the first thing we did is we took full control of our child welfare reform. And so Cowses right now has full jurisdiction over our child welfare reform. And what we're doing with that is we're addressing intergenerational trauma through the following. What happened to many of our families on Cowses is great-grandma should have passed down her teachings to grandma. Grandma should have passed her teachings down to mom. Mom should have passed her teachings down to daughter. That is what vertical lineage is. That is what made our ancestors so strong and persevere. But what happened was the following, and I'll use my maternal lineage. My great-great-grandmother, her name was Gracie. Gracie was born in 1874. Her English name was Gracie. Never attended a residential school. Gracie got her vertical lineage teachings from her mom and grandma. Gracie had Maggie, my great-grandma. Maggie attended the Round Lake Indian Industrial School in 1906. Maggie should have got vertical lineage teachings from her mom, Gracie, but Maggie didn't. Maggie went into horizontal survival mode with her sisters and cousins. Maggie had my grandma Evelyn, second generation in my maternal lineage. Evelyn should have had Gracie and Maggie's vertical lineage teachings, but Maggie didn't. Maggie went into horizontal survival mode with her sisters and siblings and cousins. Maggie had my mom Charlotte, third generation in my maternal side. Charlotte, in a world without residential schools, without the Indian Act, should have got Maggie and Evelyn's teachings, but Charlotte didn't. Charlotte went into horizontal survival mode. Charlotte had me in 1982. I never attended a residential school. My mother had to figure out how to raise a young man while trying to understand her locus of control on what she just went through on a horizontal survival mode process while trying to raise a man to be successful in this world. I can very happily tell you today I have a 6-year-old daughter, and my mom and my daughter are inseparable today. My personal vertical lineage is getting stronger. In our communities, in our nations, in this province, in this country, indigenous people, some of us are vertical lineage again, which I want to learn more. We need to learn from each other. Some are at a 45-degree angle. They're getting stronger. Some are 100% horizontal survival mode. We don't judge anymore. We put our shield down. We admit that we need to reset our minds, but our end goal is vertical lineage. In the Cows's canoe, as a chief, I get criticized from some of my citizens, but I take it because I can see the end goal is we need to get back to vertical lineage. That is what, it's not the chief's fault. It's not housing's fault. It's look at the kinships and strengthen them again and get to that vertical lineage. The unmarked graves 2 years ago, 1 year ago, moving forward, there are 130 residential schools in this country. We have identified less than 30 of them so far. So we're on this journey for a while. But the thing is every time that happens, every time a new one comes forward, we get triggered. And we always, in our mind, go to that place sometimes of the opposite of hope, because it's just so tough to understand. But where I'm going to go in conclusion is our youth are in that tent over there. Some are in this tent. Some of you are knowledge keepers. You are the foundation to where we go from here. And so let's just make sure that we gain control of our moment. And with the unmarked graves, it's to make sure that our technical and our research teams have the support, have the openness to do what they have to do. But it's bigger than that. It's in our nations now to focus on that vertical lineage and to help one another. And I think we're going to get there. I really think we're going to get there. We do have challenges. I ain't gonna lie. Like, you know, when we have things at AFN that happened a month ago, that hurts our feelings when we see our chiefs not getting along. You know, right now, you know, in some of our communities, you know, our chief and councils, some are great. Some could probably use a little bit more, you know, understanding. But the thing is we always go back to just this. And that doesn't help in that journey of where we're going. And so I thank you very much for letting me come up and share a few words. I'm good for 40 minutes, then my nose starts to grow a little bit. So I'm borderline there right now. It's such an honor to share with you. Please, I come here with a humble mind and humble heart. I mean, no better than any of you when I'm here. I've never been past Flying Dust. I've been to Nipawin and that, but you got such beautiful area up here. I'm a Southern Indian, so when cell service gets cut off, I panic. So I panicked for a while there. I don't know how you could live for that 20 minutes without cell service, because I was ready to turn around. I was just teasing, but I thank you very much. I don't know if there's time for questions or comments, but Nanaskaman, thank you very much for letting me share.
Sinese, no halianti, and do se connect can quen, dollar 9 leg. Edrinity and do your honey thirsty, in took Minsa, and two, and none is new, and two, the canine dew, and two, the didn't hare, a seal. E cotorestare, tant odi a si, se quidan li hali, 9 day, e dini azino rentan. Si ya ki quanti nan li hali di, and tu a si, and tu yaki asi no ganevelsi no nina chung deza no ni benanil ni deza no ni di dan tu silge deza e hotu e kanatiane se asi o sa o kecha saane teste me konase dere danati ai sakwen dan le khale teste kanare dere tu yahanin third tu sanut aze nuni de asio tate koi jade ne zonlisi heni ya marsi here sinse no ani ja ne do se ni jaunla de ne du horin if you want to ask questions, there's always room for questions. Thank you very much, and I appreciate Chief Cadmus Delorme sharing his experience and his story with us.
Thank you. I'll just say what Labada said. My elder. I just want to take a few things out of the presentation here today that we're exactly trying to achieve through this work that we're doing this week. You heard it in the opening ceremonies on Monday morning. The leaders that spoke, the elders that have spoken, the pipes that were lifted on Monday morning. All the same goal, moving forward, but in our time, in our way. As Chief Delorme has indicated, his people took that power and utilized it. It wasn't given to them by the government of Canada. It wasn't given them by the government of Saskatchewan. It wasn't given them by the church. They took that power. They took that power and utilized it and said to themselves, let's stop blaming each other. Let's move forward. We've got to move forward together. And these are the good words that I take of Chief Delorme's presentation today. There's no silver horse silver bus that's going to save us. What's going to save us is right here, what's in our hearts. And we have to be honest with that. We have to be true with that. It might hurt. It'll hurt at times. But we've got to go forward with it. You know, that's what I heard all week. From the pipe ceremony, to the speakers, to the people putting this gathering on. I even heard from the elders when I was having lunch with them yesterday. My table ate 2 fish that were given to us. We ate 2 full fish. But that's what they spoke about, moving forward. They said there's some good things that happened in the residential school. Yes, there was bad stuff, but there was some good things too that we learned from. Look at this friendship around the table. I sat with a guy from Jans Bay. I sat with a guy from Dillon. I sat with a guy from another Cree community, and a guy from Buffalo River. They all went to school together, and I was honored to be sitting there listening to their stories and what they were saying. This is what it's about. So the sooner we get to this healing, the sooner our grandchildren are going to be better. Our great-grandchildren are going to be better, stronger than ever. So with that, I really want to thank Chief Delorme for coming here and speaking to us today, and open our eyes, open our spirits. As I said in our first day, let's open our hearts and open our minds and open our spirits, and welcoming the healing, and welcome them, go moving forward, but at your time. I'm not saying we're going to get fixed on Friday morning. I'm saying she's going to take time, and we all got to move forward in this. With that, thank you very much, Cadmus Delorme, Chief of your nation, for bringing us your good words, opening our eyes, and thank you very much on behalf of the Meadow Lake Tribal Council.
Birch bark rafts, and the symbol is these little rafts will be released on the Beaver River Thursday afternoon. And the idea came from us. The idea came from my niece here. The raft, and I heard you mention it was we are river people. We want down on the rivers of northern Saskatchewan and the lakes. That's our life. This is a lifeboat for the kids who never made it home from, say, Beauval Residential School to go home. Their names, their members will be on these little rafts as we float them down the Beaver River to their home communities. So it's a symbol of that they are not forgotten. They are being taken home on a birch bark raft. Our grandparents used to make birch bark canoes and went down the rivers of our northern Saskatchewan rivers. This is to remember them, and they will never be forgotten. And with all the stuff that's happening with residential schools, this is part of the healing journey for our people.
That's his sister. That's Lord.